This week on New to You, Tearjerkers Pt3, The Pillowman. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the New to You Show. This is the third in our series of Tearjerkers. Quit your blubbering, hippies. So previously we had the Yes Please memoir, Amy Poehler's memoir that Mary brought to us, and we had White Flash Black Rain, the
White Light Black Rain.
Oh yeah, White Light. I keep saying that. White Flash Black Flash, the new Flash racial speedster series. White Light Black Rain, the Hiroshima Nagasaki survivor story tale. Very important to watch that. This is New to You Show, a review and discussion podcast where we try to bring things to you that you may have not heard of before, or if you've heard of them, maybe you should give them a second go, or hey, is it worth recommending that thing to somebody? You thought you'd forgotten about it, but we reminded you. I'm one of your hosts, John Holt. With me is
Julian Cage.
And
I'm Mary Varn.
All right. So This week my pick is up, and let's roll right into it.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Tell us about your pick, John.
Yeah, fluff it up for us.
Man, rough terrain, Rocky Mountain, heavy load, rocky road, up the hill you think you can, I know we can. Choo-choo man, 40 cars, 1,000 miles, 1,000 tons of tugging. Take a ride, a step.
Once upon a time, there was a little boy, upon whom his father and mother showered nothing but love, kindness, warmth, all that stuff. He had his own little room in a big house in the middle of a pretty forest. He wanted for nothing. All the toys in the world were his, all the paints, all the books, paper, pens. All the seeds of creativity were implanted in him from an early age, and it was writing that became his first love. Short stories, fairy tales, little novels, all happy, colourful little things about bears and piglets and angels and so forth. And some of them were good. Some of them were very good. His parents' experiment had worked. The first part of his parents' experiment had worked. It was the night of his 7th birthday that the nightmares first started.
The Pillowman is a play by Martin McDonagh, a Irish playwright. And he's written some films too, and he actually says that he prefers writing films over plays. And this was his first play after he had done 2 trilogies of plays based in Ireland. And this play is based in basically he had a reading in like 97 or 98 and then actually produced the play in 2003. So the basic story is that this author, this writer in a unknown place in a sort of a totalitarian alternate present, alternate past, alternate future that's sort of kept unclear, is brought in and interrogated by 2 police officers. It's a very small play. It's a 4-person cast for the most part. And he's brought in and interrogated, and initially he thinks he's being interrogated because they are coming after him for thought crimes, for basically writing tales that are treasonous, that go against the totalitarian government. And, he could face execution for that. But what he soon realizes, and what they kind of get to, is that someone is killing children in a way that his tales depict. So he has a lot of like brutal tales that are sort of on the face, maybe satire or, more like moralistic fairy tales about what happens to children, what happens to the people who are crushed under the heel of a totalitarian state, and terrible things happening to children, to the innocent, basically. And what happens is it sort of comes out that there's all these murders, and they say, hey, your brother, who's sort of a simpleton, has already confessed to these murders and has also sort of implicated you in these. And he goes and is like, well, no, my brother didn't do it. I did it. And to save his brother from execution, smothers his own brother to death, and then is himself executed. And after believing that his brother killed these kids, and most importantly, believing that there's basically sort of 3 child murders, and the last one being the most horrific based on one of his more violent tales. So the structure of the story is Act One. The structure is 3-act play, and you sort of have a first scene and a second scene in each act. And the first scene is an interrogation scene, and these 4 characters interacting. And the second scene is in the version that I saw, kind of happens above the characters in this little like tableau, and it's it's like a story as told by Couturian, or one of his stories.
He's the main character.
He's the main character.
It's a story within the story.
And it sort of informs some of the tale that you're being told. And so, one of the tales is the writer and the writer's brother. And in The Writer and the Writer's Brother, there's a boy who's gifted and is a gifted writer, and his parents encourage him to write, and they give him stories to write. And then at night, he starts hearing a child being tortured in the other room. And so his tales become darker and darker and more messed up. And his parents slip a note under the door saying, hey, there never was a child, like, hey, the child's dead or whatever, like something. And he opens the door and the parents are like, haha, it was all an experiment to make you
a better
writer, to like push your craft. So we didn't actually torture anyone. It was all a joke. He goes eventually and finds his brother. Now in the story, the brother is dead, but there's within the tale, there are a couple versions of the story where the brother's still alive, but basically the parents were lying. They weren't telling the truth, that they actually had tortured the brother. And so this is just a story, but it's implied that there are things within the story that are true. Importantly, that he smothers, after that moment, the writer smothers his parents with pillows to death. And so he kills them. And that begins the sort of theme of the Pillowman, because that's another story he tells, which is about this creature who to save children from the terrible lives that they're going to lead, goes back in time and smothers them to death with a pillow and puts them to sleep.
And he's a fluffy man made of pillows.
He's a fluffy man made of pillows, but his life is so tragic that he goes back into his own life and smothers himself to death to stop him from having this tragic life of having to like kill children. And then when he smothers himself to death, though, it unravels all of the saving he's done, so all the children go on, live, and have the terrible lives. And so this idea of smothering people and the pain in your past, there's just a lot of echoes and like layered themes. And one of the detectives, like the detectives that are these 2 guys, one is sort of the like kind, wise uncle, like he's avuncular. The other one is very brusque, and you're definitely clear that he hates Couturian from the get-go and just wants this guy dead, wants him to confess and go. And what you soon realize is that the one who's more hateful had been like raped as a child, so something terrible had happened to him, and so he actually comes, as he realizes more about Couturian and Macall's youth, starts to sympathize with Couturian.
Who's Macall?
The brother, the simpleton brother, and so who's ostensibly committed these crimes, just like the tales. So this one sort of brusquer, meaner detective actually shifts his position and doesn't end up destroying the writing, which is the sort of last thing that's left after most of your other characters are dead. It's sort of, does he destroy the stories? That's what's left of these 2 people, and he doesn't actually destroy the stories because of that shift, that change, that like there's something carries on after all of this drama plays out.
And it was super important for Couturian for his stories to live on. It was sort of like, because otherwise it was sort of like everything else that they all went through was pointless if the stories didn't get to live on, kind of thing. Right. So that was a big, and the policeman kept kind of threatening that they would burn his stories. Yeah, and it's so much about storytelling as well. Like there's stories within stories, and he's a writer, and it's about the power and the potential of stories, and also what can be scary about them, and so a lot of it is a reflection on stories and writing.
Right, and there's also this sort of reflection on like what is telling, like what is writing, like when is a writer writing a story? If someone acts on their story, how implicated is the writer? If the writer is is writing something autobiographical, then they're definitely implicated. But it's when someone else is acting upon it, like how much how much should they be held accountable for someone reenacting their murders or their their imagined crime that they're writing about. When someone reenacts it, who should bear the blame is another sort of theme and question.
That's the other thing that's interesting is that the lines between fiction and reality are totally blurred because the stories seem totally fantastical and over the top and interesting in this very gruesome manner, but then many of them turn out to be true or close to true, and which is surprising and disturbing, and then some of the ones that aren't true end up becoming true, and so there's also that whole blurring between reality and fiction, and then the fact that it's all a play and that you see reality quote unquote acted, and then you also see the stories acted out. So it's really fun and interesting structurally because of all that stuff and thematically.
And one thing that kind of got the playwright into writing the tales was that he was trying to write fairy tales in the same and try to capture that. He basically kind of quoted as saying, and I'm paraphrasing this, that he couldn't write something as dark as your Little Red Riding Hood, where someone like where they cut open the wolf and fill his belly with rocks and sew it up with green wire. That's something that the elements of that are so odd and dark, and that the effort of trying to write that is difficult. And so he was saying like this tale was his struggle towards writing those things, and then another sort of story comes out of that. Some of the tales that they are told, the first one that's reenacted is also the first child murder that's implied. There's a young girl whose father mistreats her, so she carves these little men out of apples and makes sets of them, like a bunch of little men out of apples, and she gives them to her father and says, "Save them, don't eat them." And he eats a bunch of them, and they have razor blades in them, and he dies. And in a twist, though, the other apple men come to life and say, "You killed a bunch of us just to get your father," and they jump down her throat and kill her. And so it's implied that his brother reenacted this story and shoved a bunch of razor apples down a little girl's throat, or made her eat razor apples. And then in another tale, it's this young boy is mistreated by his parents. This is one you see also in Act 1, mistreated by his parents, and he's kind of like given he sees a strange writer, and he gives this writer some food, and he's given a gift, and the writer chops off his toes as a gift, and it's like Pied Piper of Hamelin. All the children in the town are taken away, all the people are killed, except for this boy who can't follow the piper's call because his toes are cut off. He's crippled. But this child is bled, in real life. The brother has killed of the real life of this story. The brother's chopped off a child's toes, and he's bled to death. So there's that tale. There's also some like allegorical tales that aren't the children's death. Like there's one which is more about the predicament that the writer's in, called the gibbet. And in this one, it's the 3 gibbet crossroads. You have a cage with 3 criminals in them at a crossroads, and the point of view is from the tale is from the point of view of one of the men in the gibbet, and he looks over in one cage and he sees that it says murderer, and he sees in another cage it says rapist, but everyone who comes by throws their insults and spits on and has all their venom and hate for him, but he can't read his own sign, so he doesn't know what his crime is that is worse than rape and murder. So that's sort of like the backstory. And the last tale is...
It's funny, I don't remember that one.
The 3, they kind of like talk about it
I don't remember that
roughly,
one.
but the other one they talk about, because that one's more of a side tale, but the other important one to the story, besides the writer's brother and those other 2, is the little Jesus, which is a little girl who believes that she's Jesus and goes around healing people, and then her parents are annoyed by that, but they die in a car accident, and so she's sent to foster parents, and the foster parents are cruel, and they basically go like, "You want to be Jesus? We'll make you Jesus," and they crucify her and bury her alive. And there's a blind man who goes out into who's walking by this buried thing, and
doesn't hear her
and can't see that there's a freshly dug grave because he's blind, and that's one of the things she was trying to heal. And so he's afraid that there's Carturian knowing that his brother killed these other two people, is afraid that his most horrific death, burying a child alive, being crucified, is something that his brother committed as well. And sort of thankfully, it's sort of revealed that all he did was reenact this actual, like, the only innocent tale he ever wrote, which was called The Little Green Pig. And in The Little Green Pig, it's about a pig who's born green and is kind of like teased, but actually owns their difference, like owns the fact that they're a green pig. And it's a little allegory about, like, you know, having a brother with special needs. That Cartorian is sort of like, this is my, like, little brother, he's different, celebrate that, celebrate your differences. And the farmer says, you can't, we're going to paint you pink with a permanent pink paint that'll never come off. And so you'll always be pink. And so the pig laments this fact. But then suddenly, in the night, there's a green rain, and all the other pigs are turned green. But because of the special paint, he can't turn green. So he's the only pink pig. And so he's now still special and unique in spite of all the efforts of the society to make him something different. And so the sort of innocent, this is the spoiler, is the innocent ending is that this last missing child is found, painted green. And it's sort of that's like your cathartic moment in the play. And, you know, it's a tragedy. There's like, it's very, very dark comedy in some areas.
Yeah.
And it's very tragic. When we saw it,
it's pretty dark and bleak throughout,
Yeah.
like through and through.
I mean, it's a fiction set in a totalitarian government. Like, it starts off just oppressive. And in the play we saw, it was basically a stage with a table, chairs, and a single spotlight.
Yeah, I think I may have. I also saw it performed. Was it with Billy Crudup?
Yeah,
and,
Billy- and
That
Jeff
was
Goldblum.
the only time it was really in New York.
Yeah. So I also saw it that same run, and it was really good. It was
in 2005.
Yeah.
It was better than the version I rewatched on YouTube.
Yeah, the one I found one that just kind of had it performed. That's what I'd done, but
which was pretty good, but
Yeah.
just this one was better.
So it was Billy Crudup plays Katurian. He's fantastic. I really like
And
Billy
he was
Crudup.
perfect for the role.
Jeff Goldblum plays Topolsky, he's the good cop, but he's actually more sinister than the other cop because over the course of things, he also represents the view of the government and the sort of cold, like, we're going to execute you. I'm sorry, this is going to have to happen, but I have to protect society. Like, it's this sort of...
Yeah, there's definitely, like, echoes of 1984.
Yeah.
For sure.
Definitely.
Because there's a lot of, like, mindfucks and stuff in there.
And then you had Zeliko Ivanek. He played Ariel, the sort of mean cop. And he's the guy, like, if you've ever seen the show Damages, he's the Southern attorney in that show.
Yeah, he's in a lot of stuff. He
He's
might
a
have been in
character
True
actor.
Blood, maybe.
Yep, he was in True Blood. He played the Vampire King for a little while there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been around. You'd recognize
his face. And then Michael Stolbarg played McCall or Mickle. He was in A Serious Man. He was the lead character in that Coen Brothers movie, and he's another like well-known character actor. You see him in a bunch of places. A little less recognizable, but you'll like, oh yeah, that was him. He was really good. Is kind of what you'll see. The original showing in 2003 was David Tennant, from Doctor Who, playing Katurian.
The London production.
Oh, that would have been really good too.
Yeah. Jim Broadbent as Topolsky. He was in Harry Potter. He's the guy who, like, what's that? He's the one who like turns himself into a couch. In that, you know, I think they bring him to be a Defense of Dark Arts, like in the last couple books. Nigel Lindsay, another character actor, and then Adam Godley. If you've watched much British TV or that stuff, you'll see a lot of these guys. Like, they're pretty ubiquitous. So yeah, the reason I picked this was that it had sort of like toned. It has a lot of emotional stuff going on. Like, you have characters who have done despicable things, but the person who's done the real despicable things is an innocent within this world, and he's trying to help people. He's being the Pillowman to these children, trying to save them from a totalitarian world using the stories that his brother, like, he's also trying to connect with his brother. So you basically have someone who's got a mental illness, or like he has a developmental issue and doesn't quite get what he's done is wrong in some regards.
Right, and he's also like, he's just totally been damaged by his experience. I mean, that's kind of the other common theme is everyone in the world except for the one cop, more or less, is has been damaged by a screwed up world,
Right.
and it's like this perpetuating.
Well, it's almost like that
problem.
one cop is this. He represents the screwed up. Like he's the sick dark force that apologizes for it all.
Mm-hmm.
He's the apologist. He maintains it, and that's the dangerous part. Where the other ones like are impacted by it. That's why he's almost more sinister, because he doesn't have any other reason except that he's reinforcing the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas these other ones are doing it for other, because they themselves have been damaged by the society or other people within it. And what kind of got me on this was the final reveal when they show like the daughter or the sister who's or not the little girl who's like not been killed. It's heartfelt, and I welled up at that. It's something where you're happy that this child's alive. You're happy that this heartfelt story, this connection between the brothers, this sort of like the one thing that these two people living in pain all the time had is this tale, and that this was the sort of like the point, and that it's like a glimmer of hope, even though everything is ending. And it also makes all his stories matter, because that's the most important story at the end, is like telling this story helped something somehow, and that's kind of the key. Like that's the glimmer of hope. That's the one story that really should survive, is sort of the idea, and that all really helped. And then there's also like just there are times when so much stuff, these people are just beaten down so hard that you can't help but like feel for them, and feel for especially when it's acted well, that they're really like put in a position where they're making terrible choices and doing their best, and it's not like their coping mechanisms are just creating more problems.
Yeah.
And so that's why, for me, that it just hits a lot of emotional beats and a lot of emotional marks for me. And, that's why I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't remember how I remembered the story and the production and liking it very much, but I can't remember like my emotional reaction and whether or not I was moved. But certainly rewatching this version, I did not find myself like moved emotionally.
Yeah.
I mean, a little, but certainly nowhere near.
Yeah, so to
tears.
refresh ourselves, we just watched a version that's on YouTube that is, a live production somewhere.
And it's decent. It's good.
Yeah.
It's not as good. I don't think it's not as great, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, and I guess I remembered well enough. Like I just reread the screenplay and then sent you guys what seemed to be the best rendition of it that was on YouTube. So
yeah, and so I don't know if that was in part maybe the difference in performances, although I thought they were decent. I think there is something. I think because there is kind of this dark comedy bent to it, and there's also like some pretty heavy cynicism throughout, and that kind of keeps it. And also, I think in a way it's a bit too clever. All in all, and all of that kind of keeps the emotions at bay.
right.
For me, I mean, it didn't totally leave me unmoved, and it did touch me somewhat, but again, it just like nowhere near tears, I would say. Yeah. But I think it's quite clever and really interesting, and also I think like it's one of those where the way it's adapted, like there's a lot of room for creativity in how you present it as well.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see different productions of it. Yeah. What did you think, Mary?
Well, yeah, I saw it with you in 2005, and I'm in the same boat as Jules. I don't really remember much other than I really liked it a lot. I know I really liked it a lot. And I did sort of need the refresher of the story, but once I watched, that YouTube version you sent, that it came back to me, but I still don't remember if I was very moved, or I think I may have been, because I do remember really liking it a lot. But yeah, it's a really interesting story. That's it's kind of heady and intellectual, but it's still got levity and some comedy in it, and so it's a good way to digest something so highbrow, I guess.
Yeah.
and so dark.
Yeah.
And it is like I do love the stories, the dark the dark children's
fairy tales,
tales.
yeah.
And they do echo like the messed upness of real fairy tales, but they go like they're a little plainer, I guess, or maybe it's because they're a bit more modern in the language that they feel more gruesome. But it's true when you describe the wolf stuff, I'm like, yeah, that is really messed up. But I think because like as a child, you're sort of like you often first hear the sanitized version.
Right.
You know, it's sort of like doesn't hit as hard, but or yeah, I don't know. That is interesting. But yeah, but I love the dark tales, and it also kind of reminds me a bit of like some of the like Tim Burton twisted fairy tale type stuff. And I think I also like imagine a lot of cool visuals with them, and I think that's one of the things that that 2005 rendition like did really well. I thought the story visuals were more interesting, and I feel like the Pillowman himself was represented in that version. Am I imagining that?
Maybe.
I think
Because I remember
if he was, it might
seeing-
have been like in silhouette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that
They did a
was-
lot of
yeah.
like shadow play.
Yeah, because
and like kind of
Yeah.
like half transparent proscenium kind of.
Yeah,
or,
so
like,
it was
scrims
just the table on the stage, but then
above it.
kind of behind there was a wall of like vignettes.
yeah. I remember. I
Some
remember
like
those.
stained glass sometimes too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember all those visuals, very striking, and like you said, like implying just enough that your imagination could like fill in the blanks,
Right.
In a really clever way.
And the other reason I think why it hit me emotionally is that it shares some themes with like Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, where you have sort of my brother's keeper, like two people who have come through circumstances, and you have someone who doesn't understand the import or the gravity of what they've done because they don't have they like lack the capacity, or they're an innocent, but the actions that they're taking as an innocent are harmful. And so you have to, like in Steinbeck, spoiler, he has to shoot his brother because, they echo that earlier in the story when an older man has to take his dog out and shoot it himself. And they kind of say, the reason why he had to do that is because it's his and it's his responsibility. And you see that in this, where Couturian is basically, he is saving his brother from the firing squad, but it also is really like saving him from the pain of having someone else like who doesn't know him end his life.
Or judge him.
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah. And so it's really like,
It's like he can give him a loving death.
right. He can,
in a messed up way.
it's like a level of honor. And it's also a level of like, this is my brother whose crimes I'm also complicit in because I have allowed it to, like in Steinbeck's, it's really like, because I've just kept moving on and just kept going, there's a certain point where you just can't do it anymore. And it's unfortunate. Like you can't apologize for your, for the things your pit bull does, even though it doesn't know anything more than protect itself or protect, like it's kind of doing what it will do. And you can't really, like when you go to, then you have to put a bullet in it or something, then that's the tragedy of it. That's like, you understand what you are doing to this animal. And that's something that when he goes to his brother who doesn't really understand these things, the not understanding is the source of the problem and the ultimate like sadness that wells out of that when you have to actually like go and put them down.
Yeah. It's also interesting because the brother is innocent, but not completely. And he's childlike, but not a child. Like some of the bigger comedic moments is when he's sort of outmaneuvering his brother a bit, and
right.
also like, kind of being flippant and kind of dark,
right.
like, and also kind of like messing with his brother.
Yeah.
So and that's So that's the other kind of interesting wrinkle.
Yeah. That he's kind of playing with him.
Is that he's innocent, but not totally. That he's just kind of messed up. Like it's sort of like he's half like it's like he's regressive, like he's stuck at a certain age, but he's also like been around the block.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So taking it out of this, are there other tales, like other like deep fiction, almost like classics. Like, again, I think that's what this does for me, is it pushes me back to those like Shakespearean tragedies where you have people who are really put into a no-win situation, but you understand why they're there and how it's working, but they're making the hard choice, and you put yourself in that place. You are Couturian in this tale, and you empathize with them and sympathize, and then they're taking an action that thankfully many of us rarely have to actually take, or if we do, it's on a different scale, but that doesn't make the emotions any less poignant or different. And I wonder if you guys have any parallels that you can think of. For myself, it's like, again, Of Mice and Men or Steinbeck, but if there are any other similar things you can think of.
Well, like I said, as I already said, Tim Burton stories had a lot of that, like sort of tragic innocence stuff. Of Mice and Men, like, you can't help but think of that because it's so like obviously related. But no, there's nothing else in particular that comes to mind. Any tragedy really fits the mold. So that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to think of something more specific.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty broad, like fictional narratives. Once it's crafted well, it'll show sort of the tragedy. The more it reflects the human condition. Again, I'd say like Rick Moody's books. I don't know if like Chuck Palahniuk's stuff, like that's a little more like out there kind of stuff. He's playing with different themes, but they're definitely. But
he's also like playing within like stories within stories and stuff like that a lot.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think that, again, this sort of like goes to my like a crafted narrative is more likely to, like, I'm more going to be like directly tapping my emotions into it and experiencing that, because again, a fiction is also putting you in a position where it's a virtual reality thing where you're being put emotionally into the character or characters and living out this tragedy, this story that in part reflects you and that you hope you never find yourself in. And you're seeing people in situations that you yourself can relate to. And, hopefully it's touching the human condition.
Yeah. And how would you feel about a film adaptation of this play?
Pillowman? I don't know. I think it could be well done as long as I think you'd want to avoid showing the tales. Like, you'd really want to stay abstract with the tales. Like, that would be the challenge. Is like
I sort of feel like that's kind of would be the only place to go for the film. Like, the only reason to make it.
It might be animated.
Those tales parts, kind of. I guess
that would be
what
cool.
I see it is like the Elder Wand sequence, the like three brothers sequence in Harry Potter, where it's sort of like CG, so like shadow puppety kind of stuff, like that sort of obscure detail even within the animation. So it's
you would show it, but not make it like live, like full realistic live action stuff. Yeah, you want to keep it fairy tale like.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, like what shadow allows you to do is like have things obscured, have things that you don't see all the detail. It's still implied detail and implications of things. When this knife goes in, you don't see where it goes into the shadow figure. You just know that the knife is there. And that's sort of that's the implied violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it could be fun. But yeah, you're right. It would be. I don't know that I would. They'd probably screw it up. Yeah,
it's a challenge because you also would want you want it to be animation, but it also needs to carry some import and it has to have some weight. So what helped was these shadow figures had often real actors back there, half in focus as well. So you kind of had like a couple like layers of just like this is obscured fiction obscuring reality because there's some real things hidden in there. Finding that in film and in animation, you don't want it to also come out. You don't want it to seem juvenile. You want it to have the sinister like tone of realism as well, without being like a real, like you don't want it to be a reenactment or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's funny because you were asking for things that make it connected to, but I was just in my mind connecting it to your last pick for the last theme, Hedwig. Like, there's definitely some parallels. Like, there's some similar themes in there of, like childhood, like being messed up as a child and then coping with that as an adult and that stuff still haunts you and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And instead of a Broadway play getting turned into a movie with animation, it was a movie with animation.
Right.
That became a Broadway
To a
play.
Broadway play.
Yeah.
But Pillowman is not a movie with animation, but we're just speculating
Yeah.
that it could be.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other tough thing that, I mean, it's great to recommend it, but I would kind of want people's first impression of it to be at
A
the
really
theater.
good production of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
And
I
unfortunately, it's not playing. And I Googled around. I don't know if they taped that. It doesn't look
No,
like
I
you
don't
can
think they
buy
did.
it.
yeah, that's too bad. But I feel like even watching that, there's something about watching a play
In the
on
theater.
tape.
Sure,
It just kind of falls flat a little bit because you don't get the energy of being in the room and sensing
Right.
the actors and
Yeah.
stuff. So I wouldn't recommend watching it on YouTube. Is basically what I would say. I would almost like rather read it.
Yeah,
I think.
me
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
And it's hard to find, but you can find I sent you guys like a PDF of it, but you can find the play. It's available on Amazon. It's like a actor's reader.
Yeah, you
kind
can
of
buy
play.
paper copies of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not available on Kindle, but
And because it's because so much of it is stories, like it would work well to read it. I think.
Yeah,
Read.
it feels like something that I would have read in English class, like what is his name? Ibsen, like an Ibsen play or something
Right.
like that, but modern.
yeah. So would you guys recommend this to somebody if they could? I mean, if they could see it, we've just kind of said if they can see it. Now,
Yeah.
would you recommend them to read it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just because it doesn't seem like it's in production very often, and then also if you don't live in a major city, although there probably are smaller productions of it
Yeah, it
going
seems
on
like
that
there was
aren't
like
as
the ones that I
advertised.
found on YouTube were just like Long Island or something, like someone had
Yeah.
done it.
It does seem to be like it's been produced a lot. So maybe you can find it. Maybe that is the best way to see it as it was intentioned. But it seems like a good read to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you read it first and then got to see it as a play, it would be really fun.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Another play similar to this one, dark comedy, a lot of like bad stuff and very like character oriented, is Dog Sees God, which is it's basically like a realistic portrayal of the Peanuts gang. But like Snoopy's has died, and like certain characters are like they're all going through emotionally tumultuous stuff, and it's sort of like you understand these characters as children in sort of an innocent framework, and now 10, 15, 20 years as they're teenagers or even young adults, that innocence is lost and gone, and that like real world encroaches and the darkness kind of like descends. There's something that plays out there. It's really sort of interesting and fun.
Does sound good.
Yeah.
Thanks,
so
John.
yeah, good times. So Pillowman, maybe your local theater is putting it on. Maybe you could help them put it on.
Maybe you can put it on.
But you should go and read the screenplay.
The book play.
Yeah.
The book.
Yeah. You can find it on Amazon. That's pretty much it.
Once upon a time, in a tiny cobble-streeted town on the banks of a fast-flowing river, there lived a little boy who did not get along with the other children in the town. They picked on and bullied him because he was poor and his parents were drunkards. The little boy, however, was of a happy and dreamy disposition. He knew that he was kind-hearted and full of love, and that someday someone somewhere would see this love inside him and repay him in kind. Then, one night, as he sat nursing his newest bruises at the foot of a wooden bridge that crossed the river and led out of town, he heard the approach.
Okay.
Such a question, there are many possible answers, such as hard work.
Feel I'm alone in this whole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far to fetch. So
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to the third episode of Tearjerkers. All right, so I was one of your hosts, John Holt. You can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho, and you can find me on Instagram at bored, BORED_ghost, GHOST. Mary, where can people find you?
I'm at Mary Varn on Twitter and Instagram.
And I'm Julian Cage. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Beautiful Jules. Jules is spelled Jules.
All right, and Mary, before we head out of here, what's been new to you this week?
What's new to me is the fantasy series Magic 2.0 by Scott Meyer. I'm actually in the middle of audio listening to the third in the series. I believe there's going to be a fourth one. But it's just a really lighthearted, fun fantasy series that's got a silly premise. It's basically a young programmer discovers a program that is the program of the universe. And we're all living in a program. And
So he finds the keys to the simulation kind of thing.
well, so what happens is the program sort of ends up encouraging the kind of like the white guys who end up finding the program to go to medieval England, because if they basically you'll end up getting in trouble. He starts to like steal money from banks through the program, but then of course he gets in trouble, so he makes this escape route to go to medieval England, and it turns out all these other guys have done that too. So so they're all in medieval England and they're pretending to be wizards in medieval England.
So they use like high-tech wizardry, like
Well,
their
no.
iPhones and stuff.
Well, if they're from the smartphone era, but then there's also guys from the 80s and guys from the 90s, and then there's guys from the future too. And
Wait, so guys from the 80s were able to find the program?
yeah, there were hackers in the 80s.
They phone freaked that, yo.
Don't you watch movies?
Phone freak. They halted and caught fire, Jules.
They had computers back then. Yeah.
Oh, man. Don't open Halton Fire's can of worms, man.
But yeah, they, and then, you kind of find out that the women have gone to Atlantis and they built Atlantis. But anyway, it's just very lighthearted, and it's a fun audio book series that I've been enjoying.
Cool. It's very like white male perspective, or
well, yeah, but I think there's some awareness there.
It's like self-aware.
Yeah, I mean, and he's also like he's a young guy, he's in his 20s, and there's definitely it's third person, but it kind of makes fun of him a little bit too for being like, and for all of them for being kind of like cocky and.
Wait, so it's in a third book right now?
Yeah.
I'm
in the third book. I mean, I think he's writing the fourth
How
book.
are they keeping this going? It doesn't.
just the same way they had 3 Matrixes.
Well, there's just 3 different. So far, there's just been 3 different storylines. Like there's, a villain in each one, and
Is it the same
I
character
don't
in
want to
each
get
book?
too. Yeah, the same. There's a main character. I think his name's Martin. Yeah, the main character, and he has a mentor, Philip, and then there's Gwen is like a friend. She's
And who writes it again?
Scott Meyer.
Scott Meyer. All right. And
Yeah.
these are available on Amazon and
Mhm.
iCloud.
I got it on Audible, but yeah, they're newish books. I think they came out in like 2013, 2014, 2015 subsequently, and then I think he's writing the 4th book now.
Cool.
So
Are they
Wow.
option for movies yet?
actually, when I was Googling it, the suggested Google search was the first book is called Off to Be the Wizard. And when I Googled that, the suggested Google search was Off to Be the Wizard movie. So I don't know if that means there is going to be a movie or
there's interest in a movie.
right. It definitely seems like the kind of thing because like Ready Player One
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
is getting a movie. It's along
Maybe-
that vein, and if
maybe
that
the-
does well, then I'm sure there'll be like interest in this.
I think they're probably waiting to see how
Yeah.
Ready Player One plays out.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how that movie will be. It could be, I think, either a whole lot of fun or truly terrible, but we'll
Yeah.
find out.
Cool. So that's a good one. So one more time, name of the series.
Magic 2.0 by Scott Meyer. The first book in the series is Off to Be the Wizard.
Cool. All right. So we'll have links to those book series, to our contact information, and to the Pillowman and our other tearjerker topics on our website, nudyshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at nudyshow. You can leave reviews and subscribe to us on iTunes. You should also comment on there. You can also subscribe to us on most of the podcast apps that are out there. And you should tell people about the show. It may not be new to you, but it might be new to them. So you should tell them about it. So, gang, thanks a lot. And it may not be new to you, but maybe
it's new to you. You ruined it.
It may not be. It may not be new to me.
Oh,
but
this is sad.
maybe it's new to you.
So sad.
Explosion sounds. Eat a candy
I'm
sounds.
drinking my Coke bottle.
I'm sinking in the quicksand, been peddling too long. And I'm not a human kickstand, needing time to rest, but I gotta keep moving. This pitiful life is all about the music. 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 This pitiful life is all about the music.
With him together forever, without the limitation of time ever again. So the second coming of the Lord is not